At 11:48 p.m., Daniel sat alone in his apartment, staring at a number that was supposed to make him feel safe. $12,131. That was how much money he had saved over the last 4 years. No expensive vacations, no reckless spending, no luxury lifestyle. He did everything people told him to do: save money, be responsible, avoid risk. But then he opened a calculator. If his savings account kept growing at less than 1% interest, his money would barely move, even after another decade. And that was the moment something strange happened. For the first time in his life, Daniel realized saving money and building wealth were not the same thing. And the deeper he looked, the more he discovered that millions of people spend their entire lives protecting money that was quietly losing power every single year. Most people believe the hardest part of building wealth is earning more money. But the real transition happens later. The moment you stop treating money like something to store and start treating it like something that can grow. Because saving protects your future. But investing changes it, and in this video, we are going to break down the exact psychological and financial path that turns an ordinary saver into a long-term investor without gambling, without complexity, and without risking financial stability. Saving money feels emotionally comfortable because it creates certainty. Your bank balance stays visible, stable, predictable. There are no sudden drops, no volatility, no terrifying headlines saying your savings account crashed 12% overnight. And psychologically, humans are wired to prefer certainty over growth. Even if that certainty quietly costs them wealth over time, banks understand this perfectly. That is why savings accounts are marketed with words like security, stability, and peace of mind. Because emotionally, safety sells better than uncertainty. But there is a hidden problem inside modern saving: inflation. Every year, the purchasing power of money slowly decreases, which means if your savings grow slower than inflation, your money is not truly growing at all. It is shrinking invisibly. And most people never notice because the number itself keeps getting bigger. That illusion is where millions get stuck for decades. For many people, the realization begins with comparison. They meet someone earning a similar salary who somehow built investments, retirement accounts, and financial freedom far faster than they did. At first, it feels confusing, then frustrating, because both people worked hard, both saved money, but one person allowed their money to compound, while the other only protected it. And compounding changes everything. Imagine two people each starting with $10,000. One keeps it in savings, earning 1%. The other invests it, earning an average market return of 8 to 10% over long periods. At first, the difference feels small, but over decades the gap becomes enormous. Not because one person worked dramatically harder, but because one system multiplied while the other merely stored. This is the hidden divide between savers and investors. And once people see the math, they can never fully unsee it. If investing is so powerful, then why do so many people avoid it for years? The answer is psychological. Humans experience financial loss emotionally stronger than financial gain. A temporary market drop feels painful, even if the long-term trend historically moves upward. And modern media amplifies this fear constantly. Every market correction becomes breaking news. Every downturn becomes panic. People open their phones and see headlines predicting crashes, recessions, and economic collapse. So they stay in cash because cash feels emotionally quiet. But there is a dangerous misunderstanding hidden here. People think investing is risky because prices move. But long-term, the bigger risk is often never investing at all. Because time matters more than timing. And every year spent waiting is a year compounding never begins. This is where most financial advice becomes dangerously incomplete. People are told to invest immediately without building stability first. But investing without a financial cushion creates emotional fragility. Because the moment life goes wrong, job loss, medical bills, car repairs, people are forced to sell investments early. That is why the first step toward investing is not stocks. It is stability. A proper emergency fund changes behavior psychologically. 3 to 6 months of living expenses sitting safely in cash creates something incredibly valuable. Patience. When emergencies stop threatening survival, people stop reacting emotionally to market volatility. The emergency fund protects investments from your own fear, and that foundation matters more than people realize. Because investing works best when time is allowed to do the heavy lifting. One of the biggest mindset shifts in personal finance is separating money into two completely different categories. Safety money and growth money. Safety money has one job: protection. It stays liquid, stable, and accessible. Growth money has a different job entirely: long-term expansion. And once people mentally separate these buckets, something changes. Market volatility becomes less emotional, because the money invested was never meant for immediate emergencies in the first place. This psychological separation is what allows experienced investors to stay calm during market downturns. They do not confuse temporary fluctuations with permanent loss. Most beginners panic because emotionally they still treat investment money like emergency money, and that confusion destroys long-term discipline. Modern finance culture often makes investing look complicated. Charts, predictions, crypto hype, day trading clips. People believe successful investing requires intelligence, speed, and constant attention. But historically, some of the most successful strategies have also been the simplest. Low-cost index funds, broad market investing, long-term consistency. Instead of trying to predict which company will dominate the future, index funds spread investment across hundreds of companies simultaneously. This reduces risk dramatically. And surprisingly, simplicity often outperforms complexity over long periods. Even legendary investor Warren Buffett repeatedly recommended low-cost index funds for ordinary investors. Because the real advantage in investing is rarely brilliance. It is consistency. And consistency is easier when the strategy is simple enough to survive emotional stress. Compounding is one of the most misunderstood forces in finance because its power feels invisible in the beginning. At first, growth looks slow, almost disappointing. But then time changes the equation. Imagine investing $300 every month at an average annual return of 8%. That money could eventually grow into hundreds of thousands of dollars over decades. And the shocking part is this: most of that money was never directly contributed by you. It came from growth, generating more growth repeatedly over time. This is why experienced investors obsess over starting early, because compounding rewards time more aggressively than effort. The first years feel quiet, but later the curve becomes explosive. And people who start late often underestimate how powerful those early invisible years really were. The hardest part of investing is rarely financial. It is emotional. Because eventually the market drops. And when it does, fear becomes contagious. News anchors panic. Social media predicts collapse. People rush to sell. And this is where investors divide into two groups: those reacting emotionally, and those thinking long-term. Experienced investors understand something beginners often struggle to accept. Market downturns are normal, not unusual. In fact, downturns often create opportunities because regular investments purchase more shares at lower prices. But emotionally, humans hate uncertainty, which is why discipline matters more than excitement. The investors who usually win are not the smartest. They are the ones who stayed consistent long enough for time to work. The moment someone becomes an investor is not when they make their first trade. It happens when they stop seeing money only as protection and start seeing it as a tool for future freedom. This shift changes behavior. People begin thinking long-term. They stop obsessing over daily fluctuations. They automate contributions. They focus on systems instead of emotions. And slowly, wealth building becomes less dramatic than people imagined. No sudden miracles. No overnight success. Just consistent contributions repeated over years. This is the part social media rarely shows because it looks boring. But boring is often where real wealth quietly gets built. Saving money is not useless, it is essential. But saving alone was never designed to create extraordinary financial growth. Its job is protection. Investing is what creates expansion. And the people who build long-term financial freedom usually combine both systems together. They save enough to survive emergencies, and invest enough to let time multiply their future. The tragedy is that many people spend decades believing safety and growth are the same thing. They are not. One preserves, the other compounds. And understanding the difference early changes the entire trajectory of a financial life. The greatest financial shift most people ever make is not earning more money. It is understanding that money behaves differently depending on where you place it. Savings buy stability. Investments buy time. And the moment you combine both intelligently, your financial future stops depending entirely on how many hours you can personally work. Most people spend years learning how to save money. Very few ever learn when to stop saving and start investing, because the real goal was never simply protecting money. It was building a system where money eventually begins working harder than you do. And the earlier that system starts, the more powerful your future becomes.